Okay, so we're getting close here to tacking all the pieces together for our full frame. And I've taken some time now to clean all the metal, remove as much of the mill scale from our copes areas so we can get a good clean weld there. And, you know, getting it all fixed together so you can see, you know, we've got some nice copes here. And sort of my approach is to try to tack it all together at once, meaning don't do a bunch of sub-assemblies. So the more that the copes are held together with all these clamps at once, it's going to tend to lend to a sort of structural, even down here, structural integrity, that everything is tight and together to sort of make the most of this frame design, which, you know, 70 plus years old, still going strong, and actually quite amazing if you think about the strength of this head and the steering neck area, the headstock, and kind of how it's supported by 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, frame tubes. And then, you know, I haven't decided yet what we'll do down here, but we'll probably put some kind of a gusset or something similar to what the, you know, the Manx frames didn't have that, but the Atlas Dominator frames did. So we'll think about this at some point, what we need to do. But in order to sort of maintain the triangulation strength here, again, kind of at a point where I'm thinking about how to mount this cross piece for welding. So long story short, I've come up with a short piece of what is that, 1x3, that I'll probably tack on here, or not tack, but clamp, and then use it to, I've got my usual little frame tabs here, probably from A&A Manufacturing, which I hope you can see. By mounting that to this piece, it's going to really locate this cross piece very well for tacking that up, and again, maintaining the sort of the integrity of all these copes up here at the front. So I'm looking at adding 2 of these pieces to support this in a very sort of perpendicular, accurate vertical line there. And I've also got a little piece that we had from some of our earlier stuff. I may, if you can see all this, tack this on here so that we can know that this piece is centered and straight by clamping it against this piece here. And so that's going to allow us to, in a repeatable fashion, locate this cross piece, which again, very important, structural piece, to locate it in a repeatable fashion, but also to hold it in a nice location. It tends to want to fall out here. To then tack all of the above, start tacking all these pieces. In a sense, it's kind of what the reason you go to all this trouble to build a frame jig is to be able to support everything, because once you start welding, you know, things can tend to move just from the heat and the distortion. So we're trying to keep it all located and then make the tacks to finally locate everything and not have a bunch of movement. So we'll want to control the heat distortion and just place a little tack here, a little tack here, a little tack here, a little tack here, come up here, tack, 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 and then kind of go back through so that you allow the heat to disperse, because you don't want to build up a bunch of heat. For example, if you're tacking here and you heat this area, well, that may then cause this cope to pull away, and we don't want that. So you can never really just sort of weld on one tube and do like half of it, you know, weld like half of it. Can't do that. That will just build up so much heat that everything will start to distort. So you have to force yourself to kind of be patient, nibble away. So anyway, I'm going to work on this piece as we've discussed, and I'll give you a look at it after I've tacked it together. All right, kind of crowded up here, but I've got the little angle iron welded on here to abut this piece to this cross piece, and then I've just clamped it. And then up here you can see my little tabs just clamped on to this piece, and those, you know, are circular in the same diameter as this cross piece. So that fixture, you know, allows this to be mounted straight, perpendicular to the frame, again for welding, to keep the copes that we worked on so tight. And so ultimately this whole thing can be coped, can be tacked together and maintain sort of the integrity of everything, again, to avoid the heat distortion. So by keeping everything kind of tight and rigid, we'll tack this in, and off we go. That just gives you an idea of that. So I'll go ahead and tack these front pieces on next. All right, so I've got this piece that will hold this forward, you know, under the gas tank piece here. Let me just support that camera with one hand. So when you bring this in, it sort of latches onto it there and then drops down in the back. There we go. So that, then we'll then clamp, put a clamp back here to support that, and that these, you know, everything I've tried to do is square, so that will keep this cross piece from going diagonal. So you can see it's pretty smooth. So I think that's very good for making the tack weld. You know, we'll come in here and mount everything's getting crowded inside this thing. We'll mount a clamp here to support this whole thing. Again, just for tack welding. I had to trim this underside right here because once it was in place, there was no way to lift it out. It gripped too tight. So be careful what you build. But now you can see it comes out. It's a tight fit, but that's good. So getting closer here. So I'm just finishing welding, you know, getting near the end of our frame jig mounts and actual frame jig construction. I've made this rather odd looking thing. Let's see if I can unbolt it here. Yeah. So the idea with this contraption is up here on the front of the bike. I've made that just to fit on our bottom frame rail. If you can recall, we spent a lot of time getting that in there. And let me put the camera here. I've got this frame tube, lower frame tube, which actually is just you know, almost exactly 2 inches, which is the dimension of this lower piece here. It's just about 2 inches up from the bottom of the frame. So we're going to use this sort of jig, I guess you'd call it, to mount that lower area. And then at the same time, I'm going to use this cross piece to support this upper frame tube here. And I've got it just so it takes these little spacers to get it exactly right. And then there's a spacer that goes up here as well. Those have to be kind of tapped in with a hammer. But anyway, that, this little added piece, removable, is here to set the height of these two cross tubes between the two down frame tubes. Again, just for putting a tack to support these enough that when we take it out of the jig, we can fully weld them. But that kind of locks that dimension in place and sets the height of both, and the width that I've used on this 2-inch piece also will make them horizontal, and we'll tap them down to make sure they're flat against these, so ultimately flat against the bottom frame tube. So I've got just one more piece that I'm thinking about adding here to set this location for this front isolastic mount, something off of the frame here to identify where this goes. So we can do all of this without having to have an engine in place to set it up, that it'll be sort of integral to itself. And this right here is what I came up with to locate the, I guess you could call it, isolastic front engine mount position. I've already welded that bracket in, as many of you saw in the earlier episodes. It's kind of hard to do things in a correct order when you're creating out of thin air. So I wanted to come back and establish where this bracket goes by this sort of an outrigger piece. I've got a piece of flat stock at the bottom, some looks like 3/4 by 2-inch, and then just again, it's like a shock mount or something that I just had, which happens to be the 1/2-inch diameter that the front isolastic uses. And there's a spacer back in here that establishes sort of a distance away, which I've got this piece at the bottom up tight against the frame jig, and then flush right here at the front. So that gives us a kind of a repeatable location for this. Again, my thinking in making it kind of an outrigger is I'm not sure how I would get this frame tube in and out of the jig if this were welded on. You have to take these off and on a few times just to get the copes right. So having to feed this and fish it in and out of here, this long piece that goes up to the neck, it might be a little more than you want to tackle. So right now this is removable, and you would just, to get the position, we'll just slide a piece of 1/2-inch all the way through both, bolt them together with the spacers, and that'll put these where they need to be to weld those on. So anyway, it's all proof of concept here, so we're going to go with this for now as a way to locate it and get back to it. The next thing we're going to start to do is to finally tack in all the frame tubes that we have. And my thinking on this is to avoid building up stresses in this most important area here. I'm going to tend to start at the rear, tacking what remains to be tacked, probably starting down here at the bottom, and then work my way forward, tack, 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 so that there's a little bit of freedom as the tubes expand and contract and alter, so that all of those adjustments head up to here, and if need be, we'll pull them into position to tack them in. But I don't want to start up here and have stresses build up in the middle, or do it randomly. So anyway, that's just the thinking, is to try to kind of come up the rear around this area and then finish up here at the steering neck. Then we'll have to take it out of the frame jig and finish weld everything. So lots of progress. Okay, let's start making some of these final tacks. Okay, so the tacks are moving along pretty well here, here, up here, here on this cross tube, over there. Got them here and here. So, and they really don't take that long to make. So we're going to do these front two pieces next. Okay, so now that we've got everything tacked in position, I'm going to remove this top brace, and that will allow us to position this rear fender bracket and get it tacked into position. So we'll take this off. Grab the other side. Okay, so we got that clear. Now this, if you recall, we made this so that it could sort of index where this piece right here goes, and then now that we're ready for that, yeah, we can see that this fender mount piece is going to just touch the inner side of the shock mounts on both sides. So we'll make a fairly fat weld. I'll have to clamp that to get that down in position. Just right in there. Same over here.